Morning guys, how you doing? Welcome to the training ground where Eddie Howe has held his press conference ahead of tomorrow's trip to Fulham. Newcastle looking to go down there and win their third match against Marco Silva's side this season. Of course, knocked him out the FA Cup and also beaten them in the league at St James's Park earlier on in the season. But of course, a lot of Eddie Howe's news conference was surrounding injuries this morning. It sounds like it's the same squad that took to the field against Everton the other night. There's certainly no injured players back and available, and he confirmed that Livramento and Almiron are going to be out for a month, and it sounds as though Trippier might be out for a few more weeks as well. So it looks as though the squad that he's currently got, providing there's no more injuries, is going to be the squad that is going to have to see Newcastle through these next few games. It helps, of course, that there is a free week on the 20th of April due to FA Cup, so that means that there's one weekend that Newcastle won't have to be without some of their injured players. But look, it's not ideal at this stage of the season, and it's felt very much like whenever they get a couple of players back, a couple more get injured, and it's just been the story of the season, and just adapting to that is obviously something that Eddie Howe has had to deal with. Now, the one constant in that side really all season, well, two should I say, one of course has been Anthony Gordon, but the main one for me has been Bruno Guimarães. It was his 50th appearance of the season against Everton the other night, and look, just watching that game, I watched him closely at times, and at times I've maybe criticised him a little bit for overplaying things and getting the ball stuck under his feet or various bits, and shooting when he maybe probably shouldn't shoot, or but I thought the other night, he was exceptional. I thought held the team together, drove them forward in the second half, and at one stage it looked like he single-handedly was going to get Newcastle the win, and you could see the frustration seeping from his pores at the end, because he knew he'd put everything into it once again. 50 matches this season, still with 8 to go. He's also played a number of matches for Brazil as well. And look, for a player who had his injury issues last season and broke down a couple of times, and for a player who's still quite new to the Premier League, it just shows how robust and how strong and how well he's able to adapt and deal with any injuries or knocks he's picked up, and how he's gone through those last couple of months without being booked, knowing the way he plays in that holding midfield position. He's in and about every challenge. He's right in amongst everything. How he's managed to get through that without being booked, it's shown incredible discipline. And there was one stage against Everton the other night where I watched him chasing back one of the Everton midfielders, and you could have pulled him down, and he actually pulled out of the challenge and stopped himself because he knew that was going to give him a ban. And I think the discipline he's shown, allied to the way he's performed in the last couple of months, has been incredible. To be able to do that and not pick up a booking, given that the hustle and bustle and that side of the game is part of him really, and why we all like him. The fact he's managed to do that just is credit to him. And for me, him alongside Anthony Gordon by far are the players of the season, and probably quite difficult to split the two of them at this stage, to be honest. Of course, Gordon back tomorrow. Bruno, of course, will be in the side, but some interesting stuff I want to talk about is Eddie Howe was asked this morning about Bruno Guimarães and whether he's concerned that he could leave this season. Of course, remember, Eddie Howe has hinted, and Darren Neils, the chief executive, has admitted that Newcastle could have to sell this summer to be able to then get back into the market and splurge themselves. Now, until we know exactly what's going to happen with the PSR rules, of course, there was talk that some paper talk over the last 24 hours that the Premier League clubs are looking to potentially change the rules. Until we know the outcome of that, Newcastle are in a position where they're tight with their PSR spending. And you would look at it, and if a bid comes in that's acceptable, you would suggest a player may be sold this summer. We know that Bruno Guimarães has got a contract that has a release clause. If that release clause of around about £100 million is met, then he could go anyway. Now, is he worth £100? Is anyone worth £100? I don't know. But Eddie Howe was asked the question this morning about him and his future, and is there a concern that without Champions League football next season, will you be able to hold on to someone like him? And he said, look, let me tell you, Bruno Guimarães is not the sort of player you find around any corner, because he was kind of being compared to Alexander Isak in the comments that Howe had made on Isak the other night when, he said he's a one-off, he's a goal scorer, he's a scorer of great goals. He said, look, I need to make it clear here, this isn't a player that can be easily replaced, and we need to do everything to try and keep him here. He said, I hope he's going to be here for a long time. But I think there's a recognition from Eddie Howe that at Bruno Guimarães' age, he's at the peak of his powers. He will want to play football at the highest level he can. He's had a taste of Champions League football again this season. He'll have loved it despite not getting through to the knockout stages. And look, I think there is probably a fear that if a big club, a PSG, a Real Madrid, even one of the big English clubs came in, the biggest English clubs came in for him, then Bruno Guimarães could go. And it's difficult, because would you rather lose Bruno? Would you rather lose Isak? Would you rather lose Botman? Difficult. He's been here for 2 years now. He's loved his time here, but you could sense frustration from him the other night that he's kind of held the team together at times this season. And I think it's going to be a really, really interesting summer as to what Newcastle do. Now, my opinion in this is that I think Newcastle have to be playing European football of sorts. I think if they're not in European competition next season, I think guys like Bruno Guimarães could potentially have their head turned elsewhere to play European football. I think if Newcastle manage to qualify for the Europa League, or even to a lesser extent the Europa Conference, I think the players could be persuaded to say, look, we could win this with Newcastle. We see how far Aston Villa have gone this year. We saw West Ham winning it last season. Newcastle could go all the way in one of these tournaments. And look, how much would Bruno Guimarães or an Alexander Isak love to win a tournament, a competition like that with Newcastle? Of course they would. So I think if Newcastle are to qualify for Europe, it's a carrot for the players. I know it's not Champions League, but it's an opportunity to win something. And look, they know they're probably not going to win the Champions League with Newcastle, but there's a high chance that they could go all the way in a tournament like this. So I think it's highly important that Newcastle qualify for Europe next season, and it gives them strength in the summer transfer window, not just with buying players, but with keeping players as well. And I think it should be all hands to the pump at the moment to try and ensure that Newcastle are playing in the European stage next season. Of course, he was asked that question, Eddie Howe, and Howe said, look, I just see it, even if we do miss out in Europe, I see it being temporary. I see it only being for 1 year. The plan would be back in Europe the year after that. But I think when you look at someone like Bruno at 27 years old, he will want to keep playing European football now. And I think as much as the Europa League or the Europa Conference League is not the Champions League, it can be seen as a consolation to that. If there's a chance that Newcastle could go all the way. And look, let's be honest, if Newcastle are in one of those tournaments next year, they will be trying to win that. So for me, in the last 8 games of the season, it's crucial Newcastle manage to get themselves a European place, and I think that will give them a lot of strength in the summer transfer market with regards to keeping someone like Bruno or Alexander Isak. But Eddie Howe today making it clear that it's not just about keeping Isak, he wants to keep Bruno Guimarães as well, and for him, he's desperate for both players to be here for as long as possible. But his caveat was, I can never give assurances, because in football it changes on a daily basis, and of course we're fighting against PSR, and until that changes, it's going to be a real issue for Newcastle moving forward. So that's my thoughts on the Bruno Guimarães situation. I really thought he was class the other night. Really good. He stood out a mile. He stood out a mile all season long, to be honest, and to have played 50 games at this stage at that level, and the last 10 I think it is, without receiving a booking is incredible. So let's see how he goes tomorrow. Hopefully we've not jinxed him, and hopefully Newcastle can keep getting the points on the board to try and get a European spot. Look, it's very tight in the middle of the league. There are 6 teams separated by 4 points, but I just think Newcastle have still got favourable fixtures. If they can ensure that there are no more injuries, easier said than done, of course. I think I'd like to think Newcastle can clinch one of those European spots for next season and give us all something to look forward to. Okay guys, leave your comments below, subscribe if you haven't done already, and I will see you on the next video. Cheers now.